Last time we had a lightning analysis video, it focused on two stories that had Nishikata try to end the teasing by acting more mature. I said in that video that we would discuss this more in the final story where this tactic is used, and that story is the subject of this analysis. Questions, a story found at the beginning of episode 5 and is based on the manga's 19th chapter, which, just like arm wrestling, is a pretty early chapter by season 2 standards, but we will discuss that when the time is right. Within this story, Nishikata tries to act like an in-universe fictional character, Dandy of the West, in order to avoid being teased by Takagi. Of course, this does not work. Takagi immediately begins to poke Nishikata in the ribs, and upon witnessing his lack of composure, says that Dandy is supposed to be much stronger than that. Well, that's one of the things she says. She also later says that Dandy has ticklish ribs as well, playing into Nishikata's fantasy of being a stoic grown-up while continuing to exploit his weaknesses. There are two ways of interpreting Takagi's response to Nishikata's plan. The first one is that Nishikata is not fit to be Dandy. Dandy needs to be tougher than that, can be interpreted as Takagi telling Nishikata that he is not cut out to be a Dandy-like figure. This is supported by a moment during their game where Takagi adopts Dandy's lines, taking the role away from Nishikata as she takes the upper hand. The other interpretation is that even if Nishikata were Dandy, he would still be easy prey for Takagi's teasing. Dandy has ticklish sides as well, could be interpreted as Takagi saying that no matter how mature Nishikata gets, he will always have a weakness for her to exploit. This is also backed up during the questions game when Nishikata is caught so off guard that his fantasy version of Dandy breaks character to experience defeat. Now there's something interesting worth talking about when it comes to the questions game itself. Takagi asks Nishikata, "Who do you think I like?" which throws him through a loop. Which is fair enough. This question cannot be easily dodged like the question in New School Year, and it forces Nishikata to once again consider that Takagi has a crush on someone. The last time he was so forwardly confronted with this fact was in fortune telling. When he fails to answer the question, Takagi asks him whether he thinks her crush is in their class. He says no in an attempt to avoid punishment, but he receives one anyway for answering incorrectly. After prematurely finishing the game, he thinks to himself that if Takagi's crush is in their class, that it could potentially be him. He then very quickly ends this line of thought by convincing himself that this is likely a trap set up by Takagi. This is interesting for two reasons. Firstly, it means that he is aware that Takagi can influence his thoughts just like she did in Pool. It also gives us a reason that he doesn't consider romance between them more often than he does. He is so focused on the rivalry aspect of their relationship that even when he is made to think beyond their friendship, he retreats right back to the rivalry. Notice how he looks nervous until he decides that this is a trap, after which he looks more contemplative. Their rivalry is his comfort zone, and leaving that comfort zone makes up part of his overall character development. Takagi admits that she might have gone too far and offers to tell Nishikata her weakness, that she cannot help but tease him. Now, we have seen Takagi feel bad about going too far before, and this does not seem like one of those moments. If I had to guess, I would say that feeling bad is her excuse to tell him her weakness. But why would she do that? Well, because it ultimately furthers her goals. Over the course of this story, Takagi has made several references to the person she has a crush on. It had Nishikata thinking about whether it could be him until he reeled himself back into his comfort zone. To expose Takagi's motivation, we need to ask a pretty intense question. Why does Takagi tease Nishikata? If you were going solely off my analysis series up to this point, you might say to make Nishikata a better person and condition him into an ideal romantic partner. And I wouldn't blame you for saying that since I have admittedly focused on that point to the detriment of any others. The truth is that this point is only a part of the puzzle, and there is one more that I will mention in this video. Takagi teases Nishikata because rivalry is how Nishikata contextualizes their relationship. She teases him because that's how she gets to spend the most amount of time with him. Remember, the critical hit only happened because Nishikata wanted to tease Takagi. He goes out of his way to meet her in counting steps because he wants to defeat her. And when Takagi isn't teasing him, he feels as though something isn't right. So by telling him outright that she cannot help but tease him, Takagi is telling Nishikata that she cannot help but make their relationship stronger, that she cannot help but make herself happy around him, and that she cannot help but maintain the status quo. Now you tell me, if someone has just made you think about their crush and they imply all of this to you right afterwards, what conclusion would you come to? We don't get to see Nishikata come to any conclusions because he tries to play off wanting to know her weaknesses and winds up being tickled by Takagi for lying. So now, let's have a talk about the chapter number, 19, meaning that this chapter was published before the chapters that would eventually become Who is Taller, Seating Arrangement, and Calligraphy, just to name a few. So why would this story be adapted here as opposed to in Season 1? This question was easy to answer for arm wrestling because we could easily chalk it up to the hand-holding motif being more appropriate for Season 2. But there aren't really any major motifs in this story. Instead, I would chalk it up to Nishikata's state of mind and what this story does to it. The consequences of this story is that Nishikata has considered that he might be Takagi's crush, and that idea will drive some of his decisions going forward. In Season 1, he wasn't confronted with this information until fortune-telling in episode 11, and once that was out in the open, there was no time to fit in another story where this revelation was involved. Now, fortune-telling in Season 1 was saved for near the end of episode 11. It was a big revelation, whereas questions is being used as early as episode 5, implying that the idea of romance is becoming a more mundane aspect of Nishikata's life, even if he talks himself out of those thoughts. Now finally, to give you all what you've been waiting for since the last lightning analysis, the explanation as to why Nishikata's act mature plan never worked out. There's the obvious reason that Takagi would always find a way to tease him, even if he were more mature, but another interesting aspect is the brand of maturity that Nishikata adopted. If maturity is Lego, then Nishikata's attempt at maturity is Mega Bloks, a cheap imitation that is inferior in every way. Let's look at the 3 stories where he explicitly tries to act mature. In New School Year, he believed that maturity was about the title of upperclassman. He believed that age inherently came with maturity. In Coffee, he forced himself to drink something he didn't like in order to seem more mature. His version of maturity was to take advice from a similarly aged classmate. In Questions, he tries to imitate a stoic character from a movie he had watched. Again, this is all an artificial kind of maturity. Fake maturity. Maturity really has nothing to do with your taste in drinks or how you pretend to act. Maturity is about understanding stakes and acting appropriately, about putting others above yourself if their needs are greater, about accepting accountability for your mistakes, and about accepting short-term consequences for long-term benefits. By the end of the season, Nishikata will show real, genuine maturity, and it will be celebrated as the best moment in the season, if not the entire show. And that is it for this analysis. Thank you to Orion Tran for supporting me via Patreon. If you'd like to join Orion or see the outtakes for free, you can do so via links in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.